Friday and the weather looks pretty decent for mid-November. We're hoping you have good plans for the weekend despite the lockdown, hoping everybody is happy and healthy and with creative ideas to get busy. I want to welcome Erin Burry, a good friend and killer entrepreneur from Willful. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you. Sorry, always on mute.
I know it's a new reply all and so on.
And I love that you still think it's mid-November. That makes me feel like I have more time left in my year.
Like mid-November, but I said, no, it's crazy. But it's all good. I hope everybody's gotten their shopping done on this now that Christmas is around the corner. We thought Erin and I are big defenders, believers, and promoters of simple planning. And estate planning sounds like it's a bit of hidden mystery, but we want you guys to think about it a little bit differently. Estate planning doesn't mean that you're going to die. It's basically trying to gain some kind of control over your assets while you can. The fact that we are all going to die is not a surprise. And what we're trying to make sure is that if something happens to you while you're alive and that, heart attack is not strong enough, you're not at anyone else's mercy. And honestly, that's the only thing you can do yourself after, things happen. There's absolutely zero control over that. We thought we would put a brief overview of why it is important to have an estate plan, as it is, important to have a financial plan, as it is important to have a life plan. If you don't have an idea of what you want and where you want to go, you will just continue walking with absolutely zero idea of whether what you're doing is working or not. So this is just an awareness thing, and we want to hopefully plant the seeds. And what better than with Erin, that has the easiest, no excuse solution to make it happen. So Erin will present on wills a little bit later, but Erin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
For sure, yeah. So thanks for the introduction, Elke. I am the founder of Willful, as you've already mentioned, but I've really come at this from a consumer perspective. So I'm not an estates lawyer by background. Really, I've spent my career in technology and marketing, and as a consumer who appreciates easy online experiences, I really created Willful because I saw a gap in the market for tools that appealed to me, and it just seemed really kind of unapproachable and old school to, book appointments with lawyers and go to their offices. Not that there's anything wrong with that, and I'll get to that when I present, but I'm really coming at this from a consumer perspective. And I think that that's helpful in that I kind of understand the same pain points that probably all of you have, which is, it's not fun to think about death. And it's, something that always falls down the to-do list. And it's something that, a lot of us have had to think about this year because of COVID and emergency planning being brought to the front of our minds. But and I run the company with my husband. So that's a fun fact. And thanks again for having me.
Well, welcome. We can't wait to hear what you have to say. So let's get started. Obviously, many of you on the call are lawyers, so we're not going to tell the lawyers that we're giving legal advice here. So as always, we say every situation is different. So before you go out and do your own thing, please make sure you talk to a lawyer unless you're willing to go through the Willful route, and then that's an alternative. But nothing that you'll hear here should be construed as advice. I'm just continuing to allow people in. So who needs an estate plan? Honestly, everyone, because an estate plan is not just if you die, right? There is a power of attorney that goes with it. And that's in case you don't die, but you can no longer make decisions, be it to look after yourself, from living or livelihood point of view, or if you can't make financial decisions. I sit on the investment committee of the public guardian and trustee, and it's really sad to see how large the portfolio is because people didn't plan on time. And when they had the opportunity, it's easy, it's simple, just do it. Honestly, if you're getting married, if you're getting divorced, if you're having kids, if you don't want kids, if you have a pet, if you have a house, if you're into charity and you want to do a tax efficient plan, by all means, there are ways of doing it. If you own a business, I'll tell you a little bit of a horror story later on, but that's really important, particularly important when you have a business and you are accountable to more than one family. If you don't like CRA the way we don't like CRA, having an estate plan at least helps you or forces you to find ways in which you can reduce your tax burden alive and once you pass. So honestly, if you have a pulse, you need an estate plan. What happens? Well, I'm too young. I'm single. I don't have kids. I'm too old. I missed the boat. Well, I didn't do it on time. No, that's only for the Westons. That's not true. It's for everyone. And I can tell you, personal experience, if you don't have a plan, the mess you leave behind really affects more than one. And try not to be selfish. You owe some kind of planning to someone, and just don't, if anything, to yourself, to have an idea of what it is that you want to do. It's one of those things that getting ready to prepare is very painful, but once you do it, you sleep really well at night. If you don't feel that you can do it on your own, maybe don't do it on your own. Talk to someone like a financial advisor or your lawyer, or start somewhere. But it is proven, like when you go to a gym, when you have a personal trainer and you're accountable to someone for your activities and your actions, you are much more likely to reach your goals and to make sure that your estate plan makes sense, that all the pieces connect, and that everybody is advancing at the same pace and in the same direction. If you work with somebody who can advise you, you will likely accumulate more assets. That accumulation will require more advice because you will have to do some kind of tax planning. So everybody has the opportunity to be wealthy. It's when you overly concentrate your risk in either not doing something or in just having an investment portfolio and in not having a will. Those kinds of risks that don't sound like risky, that is the difference between those who can get ahead in life and those who stay, turning the wheel. So what we want to make sure is that you guys, if you don't feel like you have the time or the inclination to do it on your own, reach out and get someone to help you. The most important question in an estate plan is to know what do you want? What's important to you? What meets your values? What's that important thing that you've tried to do? If you don't know how to do it, surround yourself with a team that can help you. Part of your estate plan needs to have, of course, and evidently, a will and a power of attorney. That will call for sure for tax planning. That gives you the opportunity to do philanthropy. And if anything, even if you're not charitable, philanthropy is a fabulous way to do tax planning. And life insurance is something that is always seen hand in hand with wills and powers of attorney because it helps you fund your wishes. Make sure that you're not doing this in isolation, that someone else knows what's going on. There will be passwords, there will be wishes, there will be things that you want to do. Make sure that you're not the only one who knows it, because then, like my grandmother, she went to the grave without sharing her recipes, and we're all mourning that loss. And make sure that you look at it once a year, twice a year, every time there's a change in your life. It's very important that you look at it again and again. Wait. What is included in your financial plan or your estate plan, or call it a plan? Yes, you're growing your assets. You're also somewhere in between trying to figure out your retirement. You have access to a million different investment vehicles. So you have to look at that too. At the same time, you want to make sure that your taxes are not unnecessarily high, and your estate plan is, call it your ultimate goal, your lighthouse, or where you want to go. Make sure that you, through your plan, be it financial planning for when you're alive and a combination of financial and estate planning from where you're not, that you're clear what's going on and how the pieces fit together. How do you get started? Well, the most important way to build wealth and create an estate, a solid estate, is understand, it's like building a house. Building the foundation is not fun, it's not pretty, it's not sexy, but a good foundation will allow you to have a solid house. You need to understand how your money is being earned, how your money is being spent, how much money you're saving. Are you saving? Are you wasting? Or are you actually following a plan? Then you need to see forecasts. How do they play out? When you see 5 years, 10 years, 20 years out, how does that look? Do you need to make adjustments? Is it time to cut back on things? Is it time to reallocate? Is it time to merge accounts? It's a clarity that should lead the whole conversation. Human capital. If you can't work and you can't make a living, your savings and your entire plan will crumble. If you die, what happens? So that's when you have make sure that you yourself, as the earner or as a family runner, or you as a person, are don't become someone else's burden, and make sure that your plan is protected. And that's where insurance comes in. You want to make sure that everything you do is tax efficient. People were having heart attacks because the market tanked in March 30%. The market is back. Nobody says anything. With CRA comes every January for 53% of your income. So plan, make sure that you keep more money in your pocket, and make sure that you can grow your wealth with a proper plan. Financial allocation, what is that? It's basically diversifying your assets into different buckets. It could be real estate, it could be investments, it could be, your RSPs, your non-register, your TFSA, or second property, your cottage, all sorts of things that you can do to make sure that if something fails, the risk is at least smooth with the other buckets you have. Ultimate is estate conservation. Again, code word for more money in your genes. Don't leave it on the table. Don't miss out on opportunities. And again, the important thing is that you're clear and comfortable with what's going on. So let's dive into what is a will and how can you get to it, and can you take at least baby steps to get there. So I'm gonna share screen with Erin, and then eventually I'll claim the host back. But Erin, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And that really sets the stage. Sometimes I felt like you were verbatim saying all of the things that I usually tell folks. So it's nice to know that there's someone out there spreading the word as well. And again, thanks everyone for joining to talk about this today. I'll try to keep this, pretty brief so I can hand it back over. We also have Scott from my team on the line. I do have to hop off after this just because we're doing some volunteering to drop off gifts to seniors today, which is very delightful, socially distanced, of course. But if you have any questions at any time around willful or around estate planning in general, of course, our team is always happy to help. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Should see a big willful slide. Wonderful. Thank you for the thumbs up. I can't see your name, but the gentleman who did the thumbs up. So first, I just wanted to tell you a bit about our story. As I mentioned, I'm not an estates lawyer, and I actually think that's a good thing because I think I'm the voice of the consumer. And really, I'm building a product based on the needs of the average person who doesn't know the complexities and the ins and outs of estate planning. So this handsome gentleman next to me in the photo is my husband, Kevin. And really, Willful was inspired by an experience that we had with his family where a family member passed away. And we just had a ton of unanswered questions. Where are their important documents? Do they want to be buried or cremated? What are their assets? He had never spoken to his wife of 30 years about these things. And so our family was really just left scrambling. And so we really decided, okay, there's a problem here. People are not talking about their end of life wishes, either because of fear or because of procrastination. And even if they were, there's not really any kind of easy, accessible, affordable tools that allow you to record those wishes and share them with loved ones online. So our goal with Willful is really to use technology to make estate planning more accessible to people. And we're starting with wills and power of attorney documents, but the idea is that in the future, we'll hopefully have a variety of products that help you, whether you're preparing for your own passing or whether you're dealing with the loss of a family member and looking for tools to make the estate administration process easier. And the problem that we've already talked about is just that we, unfortunately, as a country, are not thinking about or talking about our legacy. The data points are pretty clear. You know, almost 2/3 of Canadian adults don't have a will. Even if you do, it's probably, you know, a good chance it's been sitting in a file folder collecting dust for the last 10, 20, 30 years. And really, when we looked at interviewing customers about the reasons that they don't have a will, it always comes down to a few things. Cost, you know, it can be expensive to create an estate plan and then to adjust it over time. Convenience, in that, you know, it often involves meetings in lawyers' offices, or it just involves you taking time out of your own busy schedule to make decisions, have conversations with loved ones, and actually put attention to it. And then finally, complexity. It's a pretty opaque process, just like filing your taxes. No one really is an expert in this stuff, so it can seem very overwhelming, especially because we don't learn about wills or estate planning in school. And unless your parents were really open about talking about it, which not many are, you probably have no idea what goes into the process. Then add to that a little human nature with not wanting to talk about death and putting off things that don't have a hard deadline, and you have a recipe for most people not having comprehensive end-of-life wishes. So we're tackling this through a very simple online platform. I'll tell you just a little bit about the platform, but I think, you know, I always say my goal and my raison d'etre is convincing you to get a will. Whether you choose to do it on Willful is really up to your budget, life situation, preference for speaking with a lawyer to get legal advice. So this is one option available to you, and I'll talk about all of the options in a moment. So how does our platform work? Well, it's pretty much, think of it like the TurboTax for estate planning. So we work with estate lawyers in each province. We're available in almost every province right now. And you go through and basically answer a series of questions like you would on TurboTax. And then we give you PDF documents with an instructions page on how to print and sign them to make them legally valid. Unfortunately, the law has not caught up with technology, so you do still have to print and sign the documents. It's not legal to sign or store a will or power of attorney document online. And the pricing is more approachable than a lawyer, but again, your situation definitely may require visiting a lawyer, or you may upgrade to that in future. But I did just want to speak in general. I mean, we've already spoken about some of these points, so I won't belabor the point. You know, to me, estate planning reduces guesswork. It, you know, saves the court from getting involved in a lot of these key decisions. But I did want to highlight what happens if you pass away without a will, because I hear this from a lot of folks. Well, if I don't have a will, my stuff just goes to the people I would want it to anyways. Is it really that big of a deal? So I just wanted to highlight that if you do pass away without a will, there's a provincial formula in each province that dictates how your assets will be distributed. And most often it doesn't match up with what you would want. So it's very common for someone who's married and has a child to say to me, oh, well, it doesn't matter. I don't need a will because if I die, everything will go to my spouse. And that's actually patently untrue. Their assets would be split 50-50 between their spouse and their child. And if their child's a minor, those assets would likely be held in trust until they turn 18. And so their spouse wouldn't be able to access them. It would create a whole mess. Having a will that clearly defines who you want your assets to go to is just a really easy way to make sure that you're not relying on that provincial formula to reflect your wishes. And if you're common law, common law spouses are not entitled to anything under those provincial rules. So it's even more important if you're common law. And then just, you know, outside of the assets, not having a will means, number one, the courts have to assign someone to wrap up your estate. In your will, it's called an executor. If you don't have a will, it's called an administrator. And that process takes weeks, if not months, to appoint someone and to give them the power to actually start administering your estate, which means money and assets end up in your beneficiaries' pockets much later than they would have. And also, if you have minor children, it means that the courts are going to decide on a caregiver for them versus you being in the driver's seat on that. So I think those are the key reasons, but there's this big unsaid reason, which is it's just a pain in the butt for your family. They have to guess at what you would have wanted. They don't feel good. They wonder whether they're making the right choice. It's more paperwork. It's more burden. So if the number one reason I hear that people want to get a will is, I don't want my family to have to go through this mess when I pass away. So what are the different ways to create a will? Well, there's really a couple key ways, and the way that you choose to go will depend on your budget and your personal situation. I'm going to highlight them all, and obviously, if you have questions, you can let us know in the chat. The first and the cheapest is a holograph will. A holograph will is a handwritten will, and in all provinces except BC and PEI, which have some nuances around it. If you live in those provinces, definitely make sure you speak to someone before you do a holograph will. But in Ontario, for example, you could pick up a pen and write your will on a piece of paper. The only requirements are that it has to be 100% in your own handwriting, and you have to sign it at the end. It's the only type of will that doesn't require any witnesses. And while it's free, and that's great, and it's easier because you can just literally take pen to paper, a lot of folks don't know what to write. If you don't have any knowledge of estate planning, you might leave out some of the key decisions or not assign backups for certain roles. So if you are going to go this route, definitely, do some research to make sure you're writing something that's going to cover you really well. The next level up from there is DIY will kit. These are the paper kits. I call them Mad Libs for estate planning that you might find at a store like Staples. Fill in the blank. Some provinces have free forms on government websites that you can print out. And those are, really cost effective, 30, 40 bucks from a store like Staples. The challenge is they're not tailored to you. They're very fill in the blank. And, you don't get any advice along the way. So a big problem with the will kits is they're often not signed and witnessed properly, which can invalidate the entire will. So if you are going to go this route, make sure you really carefully review the requirements to make it legally valid. Because what makes a will legally valid is not who creates it, it's how it's signed and witnessed. And that's the big thing to remember. The next option from there is an online platform like Willful. Essentially, somewhere between the templated will kit and a lawyer. It's more customized to you, more hand-holding along the way, but it's still not going to be as comprehensive. We can't write in custom clauses. We can't give you legal advice. So if you want to have the most comprehensive, customized will, and you want to, or you just want to talk to a lawyer, then a lawyer is always a great option. They're the most expensive, typically starting at about $400 to $500 and up, depending on where you live. But again, you get to sit face to face with someone virtually or in person and get legal advice and have any sort of complexity catered to. So whatever way you choose, those are the ways you can legally create a will in Canada. And then just what can add complexity? These are a few of them. This is not an exhaustive list. And if you have questions about this, feel free to reach out. But you're separated but not divorced. That can add complexity because of separation agreements and because you're still considered legally married in the eyes of the law. Businesses, often folks set up things called dual wills, which separate their business assets from personal for tax purposes. If you have assets in other countries, you might want to create a secondary will in that jurisdiction. You need complex trusts. For example, you have a dependent with a disability and you need a trust that specifically addresses that. And conditional wishes. I've had people call me and say, hey, I want to only leave my son his inheritance if he graduates university. That's an if this, then that statement, which is called a conditional gift. And that's not something we cater to right now. And then finally, you just want legal advice. And the good thing about Willful is that we don't want you to use the platform if you're not the right fit. So we have a warnings page that very clearly outlines a lot of these scenarios. And if you're not sure, you can always reach out and we'll be the first to tell you that you should visit a lawyer or that you may want to. And I just wanted to end on kind of updating your will. I think this is really a behavior change that we're trying to promote, which is your will is not a one and done. Your estate plan is not something you create and then forget about. Often it is. And then, having an out of date estate plan is almost as bad as not having one at all. So we're really trying to get people into the habit of looking at this once a year. Even if it's at the time you do your taxes, let's combine two tasks no one wants to do. And you just review it. You make sure that no one in the will has passed away. way. You make sure your choices are still relevant. Maybe you got divorced and you want to take the X out of your will. Maybe you moved provinces and you want to make sure it reflects provincial legislation. There's a whole bunch of reasons you may want to update your will, but you can do that in a few ways. You can either, if you visit a lawyer, get something called a codicil, which is just like an addendum. You can execute a new will, and that's typically what we do on Willful. You make changes, print out a new PDF. As soon as you execute the new one, you destroy the old one, it revokes it. Or you can also make handwritten alterations, but there are very specific legal requirements for that. So if you are going to do that, again, make sure that you know what makes them legal. And then you can just keep your will up to date and store all of the other stuff that your family might need with it. A list of assets, which typically are not included in the will, life insurance policies, powers of attorney, all of those great things. And I promise your executor will be looking up at the sky and saying, thank you so much for putting this together and saving a lot of that effort. So that's the end of my little segment. Thank you so much for having me, to the Rubach team. I really appreciate it. And to everyone who's listening, you can reach out to us anytime at hello@willful.co with any questions. Obviously, you can also reach out to the Rubach Wealth team. And we very much work in tandem with financial planners and advisors all the time, because there is so much to estate planning that's actually nothing to do with the will and everything to do with tax planning, ownership of assets, and all of the stuff that the Rubach Wealth team is going to be able to help you with. So they do have a promo code that you can use, and I believe they'll send that out. And again, thanks to the Rubach Wealth team for having me, and I will hand it back over.
Thank you, Erin.
And stop sharing.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Erin. I think, as we said, we've always, let me claim my host back. Hold on. Would you mind making me host again?
Yes, I can do that. Just give me 1 second.
So we want to make sure, like, if anything, you want to make sure that your ex does not have your access to your, or makes hold on, people entering the waiting room. Admit all. You want to make sure that your ex is not your executor or your power of attorney, because then they can pull the plug very quickly.
And they may want to, depending on what happens. I just wanted to say I have to head off for this volunteering opportunity. Thank you so much for the team for having me, and reach out with any questions, and hope you have a great weekend.
You too. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
So,
do you mind if I quickly say one thing, Alka?
Sure.
I was just going to say that the promo code is actually for 15% off. We upgraded that recently for your team. So just wanted to highlight that.
Even better. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, I'm heading off as well. I have a 12 o'clock call, but feel free to shoot any emails or any questions to anyone over to partners@willful.co.
Perfect. Yes. And we will send an email around with the survey and everything, and we'll include your contact info. So it's all good.
Amazing. Take care.
Happy spreading. So yeah, and the other thing too is, for those of you who have kids, probably the guardianship situation when your kid is 2 or 3 is very different from, when they're 13 or 14. You can't really uproot them the way you would have in the past. So it's an annual conversation around, as Erin says, it's a good opportunity when tax time comes. So part of your estate plan, and in combination with your financial plan, is making sure that you don't leave money on the table. You have the opportunity to plan for your taxes when you create your estate plan. If you don't do so, the day you die, CRA assumes that you sold everything that day. For now, you get an exemption for your principal residence, but the rest, your portfolios, your registered, your non-registered, your real estate, your cottage, all that stuff is considered sold, and all that bucket of money is taxed at the highest rate. So if you can plan and avoid that now and leave more money in either, to your family or community, why not do so? Again, philanthropy is a huge opportunity. It can be a strategic thing to do. It could be something that, matches your values and something you want to do. And you can do a bit of both while you're alive and once you pass. It's giving meaning to your wealth, and we're big proponents of that at Rubach Wealth. Is it for everyone? We wish it would be. It's not for everyone, and some people don't know because they don't know how to start or where to start. But we're happy to have the conversation with you. At the end of the day, Canada is a great place, and we want to make it even better if there's a little bit we can do. Life insurance is part of your estate plan. Well, it builds flexibility, and it's not something that will bring the person back to life, but it will give the family options. And having an estate plan, having life insurance to fund it is always good. That will allow the family to be sad and not sad and angry and anxious because they don't know how to do it, or they have to sell a house and move schools or fire sale stuff because they have nothing, no, or not enough to put the person even in the cemetery. So all those GoFundMe's we see for people that, you know, they were not necessarily in a lower tax bracket, they were in the middle, or they just failed to plan, are pretty much unnecessary when you have the opportunity, you have the level of education, and that you know that you should do something that you should do anyway. So life insurance, we love it. We implement it. Is it the right time? Is it the right product? It all depends. That's what we do for you, but it's something that goes really hand in hand with an estate plan. If you are a business owner, you owe this. Probably your shareholders agreement stipulates that you have to have it. Many business owners in Canada don't even have a shareholders or a partnership agreement. So again, those agreements are part of your estate plan. It's part and parcel. If something happens to you and you don't have those agreements in place, and you don't have clauses that address what happens when something happens to you, it's an absolute disaster. First of all, if you have a really good relationship with your partners or your other shareholders, well, that's great, but you're leaving your family at their mercy. And when a family is feeling vulnerable at a time, probably the decisions that might be made are not the best. The business owners might also feel vulnerable with the loss of the business owner, and all sorts of emotional decisions kick in. The scariest of stories is when we ask our business owner clients whether they have something in place, and they say no. We ask them, like, okay, John, do you get along with Max, the other partner? And they say, yeah, we're best friends, so our families hang out all the time. And do you get along with Max's wife? And I'm like, oh yeah, she's great. She's she's into nature, and she has this business of this lady was into a business that would reestablish life in certain areas. So kind of like the Nature Conservancy does, reestablishing life in certain areas where humanity has destroyed the habitat. So it's very environmental, very friendly, and so on. And these guys were in the manufacturing of car parts. So obviously, if Max dies, the wife becomes the automatic partner of John. And clearly, that's not a world that that John and this lady were talking the same language. And that's what happens with businesses when there is no estate planning, when there's no proper planning in place, there are no shareholders agreements, there are no wills in place for the business as well. The risk is there, and that's how ventures fall apart. So don't risk being in business with somebody who's not even part of the partnership by will, other than by force of law. So Aaron already talked about it. When do you look at your plan again? If you marry, if you divorce, note that if you get married, any former wills that were in place are void. But if you divorce or remarry, your old one doesn't necessarily get that. You do need to get a new one. If you have a new child, add that kid to the plan. If you become a widow, if you're sick, if you change your mind, if you have grandkids, if there's a business to transfer, if there are assets added to your estate, or your net worth, if you want to call it, as opposed to estate, anything, any major change in your life, the same reasons that you would get insurance, life insurance, or the same reasons why you would call a lawyer or talk to your tax guy, looking at your will is a must. People should not do what everybody does, that they set it up one time and they forget it. It's a terrible idea. The only thing you're doing is leaving an absolute mess behind, and it's not fair to anyone, because at the end of the day, well, you're dead and nobody will feel that. You won't feel it, but it's your family that's going to get really, really hurt. and nobody wins. So yes, there as Erin said, there's a range of options to get an estate plan done and documented through your will. And yes, going to a lawyer can be expensive, and willful is really inexpensive and kind of like if you don't do it, you're absolutely out of your mind. But the most expensive and ineffective proposition is not having a will. The amount of money that it is lost and left on the table and goes to professional services and litigation and so on because you didn't have a will 10 times be larger than if you have a will and you document things. So just honestly, rip the Band-Aid, do it, get it done. December sounds like a fabulous month to do so, or November or any of the COVID months seems to feel the same way. So just do it. Get curious, go on to willful, see if that resonates with you. And if you think there's a little bit more sophistication, then take the next step. But seriously, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to someone to do some kind of level of financial planning. Don't leave it to CRA. CRA is our own enemy, our only enemy that we're trying to fight every day. And make sure that you protect yourself and have control over your assets as much as you can once you pass, but definitely while you're alive, and try to keep more in your pocket. So again, it's not a one-time exercise. And now I want to open it to the public to see if anyone has any questions that I could ask. I'd be happy to do so. And if there's an answer I don't have, I will find it out for you. So